thank you for joining us at Therapy Chat with Phoenix Behavioral Health. I'm Dr. Dawn Parks, and with me is Christine Delorier, licensed therapist and addiction specialist. And today we're going to talk about health, and specifically mental health. So much focus is always on, physical health, taking care of your physical health, going to the doctors, seeing your PCP, getting your yearly physical, those kinds of things. But mental health is still fairly neglected. And so we want to talk about some mental health issues or some situations that could create mental health issues and some of the symptoms and signs that we can look at. So it's not, and this is important, it's not replacing at all our visit with our PCP, but it's something that we want to use as well as. It's very important. And on our graphic that's up, I've listed some different areas that we want to look at: mind, body, and behavior, all relating to mental health. And the first set that's up on the graphic is mind. And the list is relatively long. The list is actually quite a bit longer, but it would have been a really long list. So I put some of the main ones up. So when we're feeling low mood, feeling down, and everyone feels down, and everyone has a low mood, but when it gets to a point where it's happening for quite a bit of time, and there's not much change. Of course, when there are situations that happen that are challenging or very stressful, difficult to handle, we're going to have a low mood, and that's just a normal reaction. But the question is that low mood continuing on and on, or is there perhaps nothing specifically that's happened and I'm just feeling very down, feeling very frustrated and irritable, a lot of excessive worry, difficulty communicating. It's hard for me to talk about what I'm feeling, or I'm feeling that people don't want to connect. Hard for me to connect. A feeling of dread, feeling disconnected and detached from the world. Some people will say, I feel like I'm watching myself. I feel like, a common thing. And emptiness, hopelessness, and a very common thing, racing thoughts. These are just a few. We could add to the list, but I think these are common, very common. And when we're experiencing those, and like I said, we always, everyone experiences some of these things occasionally for a short time, but when they seem to become more pronounced and they're not changing, that might be something that we want to contact our therapist to talk about, to explore.
I think some of this also is impacted seasonally. I think you'll see an escalation of a lot of these symptoms in the late fall and winter. So that is a major factor, a time of year, in terms of how severe some of these feelings or symptoms are.
Yeah, a big one. Yeah, and we're talking about weather changes. Also, certain holidays. Not everyone loves Christmas. Some holidays can be really sad and depressing. Anniversaries of loved ones that we might have lost, things like that. So what about the body, how we feel it physically? And I just want to point out that, we've listed up here mind, body, and behavior. sometimes we feel it, we're more aware of it in a certain area. Some people are not so in touch with how they're actually feeling and their emotions, but they're very in touch with how their body's feeling, or their behavior is very noticeably different, right? So you could experience these symptoms, these signs, a little bit of everything from every category, or more so in one category than another. But physically, a very common one, palpitations. You know, and most people have palpitations, but a lot of people are not even aware they're having palpitations. Feeling nauseous, feeling sick, ringing in the ears. Often, you know, that connection isn't even being made. Could it be an anxiety type of thing? Sweaty palms, just sweating in general. Tingling in the arms, the hands, the face. Panic attacks. Fairly popular, fairly common.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, panic attack.
Yeah.
Blurred vision. Sleep issues, big one. You have a racing mind, and you may be exhausted, and as soon as you start to fall asleep, you wake up suddenly. Right? Or you have no problem falling asleep, but then you wake up at 2 in the morning and can't sleep for the rest of the day. And then you're exhausted all day. And then sleep deprivation causes issues throughout the day, which contribute to feeling depressed and anxious, and it's this vicious cycle. Digestive problems, dry mouth, and those again are some of the main ones. There's quite a few others. Again, important to rule out any physical issues. But all of these symptoms can be very much connected to mental stress, high levels of anxiety, depression. Behavior. And sometimes, you know, when we're talking about the behavior, we perhaps notice it in someone else, a friend or a family member that we notice. They seem to be very withdrawn lately, avoidant, you know. They are self-harming. You know, it could be cutting or hair pulling or picking skin. Overeating or undereating is a common thing, you know. I mean, sometimes, you know, well, quite a lot we think when we're talking about eating as overeating, you know, emotional eating. So you're not really hungry, but you just open the fridge and look at it, and you just need something to eat. But equally, it can go the other way, where a person has no appetite and they don't want to eat anything. Increase in alcohol or drug or smoking use. Constant physical movement, constant fidgeting, and difficulty slowing down. So again, a person may feel exhausted, but they just can't, you know, slow down, sit down. We can add a little bit more to that list, but that's quite a long list already. And again, I just can't overstress it, making sure that things are all set with your PCP too, because there are some issues that could cause those same problems. You know, it could be overactive, underactive thyroid, could be anemia, use of recreational drugs, a lot of other things too. So we want to get that cleared out and make sure. But again, really good reasons to check in with a therapist and talk about those, you know.
Right, and if you are using any substances, it's probably a good idea to take a break from them, because it's very difficult to assess depression levels or anxiety levels if you are substance abusing, because they will skew the results. They will cause, often, as you said, a lot of the symptoms that you're trying to eliminate.
Right.
So you really have to separate that, and that means getting off them for several weeks to a couple of months so that you can get an accurate reading of what's going on biologically with you. And that's not just for the therapist, it's also for your PCP.
Yes.
He can't do an accurate assessment either, or make accurate medication recommendations.
Right. Yeah. So, what are some of the things that could, trigger or start us moving towards having some issues with mental health? And there's a few different categories, and there's always a genetic component to some things. It may be even with addiction. There's a genetic component to it. Depression, anxiety, but that's only a small piece. Whether that gene is actually turned on or not will depend a lot on how we manage what kind of lifestyle we have, and how we manage our own health, and the way we think about things and our activities, etc. So a big category is childhood trauma. Adult trauma is, of course, big and very difficult to manage, but with childhood trauma we don't have any set brain maturation at that point, so we're still developing. So as the brain is developing and then we're putting trauma into it, the brain doesn't have that stable sense that, for example, a person who is 25 who's had that healthy upbringing, stable upbringing, experiences trauma, they have a little bit of more of a foundation than what happens in childhood trauma. And there's so many clients over the years that I've seen who will present, who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who have never really resolved the things that happened in their childhood. And so from time to time over their lifespan, certain stresses happen, certain things happen, and they just trigger this stuff. So it's not like they're remembering necessarily or thinking or holding a grudge against this stuff that happened all this time back, but later, let's say I'm in my 30s or 40s and I have a divorce, and it's a traumatic divorce. When there's unresolved childhood trauma, that tends to come up as well. So it's continually, being brought up.
Well, you mentioned the importance of the mind and the body connection, and I think that's really key for people to pay attention to, because the mind not only affects the body in terms of how the body feels, but the reverse can be true too. If you do things to help the body, you're going to affect the mood and the mind.
Absolutely.
So certain relaxation techniques for the body will help calm your mind, help you to be able to get a good night's sleep, help you to be able to manage things and not have panic attacks, or have some ability to maybe control the panic attacks. And depression, what you're doing to help yourself with exercise can affect the endorphins in the brain that can help your mood to elevate. So all of that is very much important.
It is.
And that leads also to environment, and environment is essential too. If you're in a very depressing environment, or an environment where you're being abused in any way, you're not going to be able to get healthy in that space.
Right.
Or you're in a substance abusing environment, you can't get healthy. You've got to have all those three pieces coordinate to affect you kind of re-emerging to a better place.
Absolutely. There's a saying where when the mind goes, the body will follow. And as we said a few minutes before, sometimes you're not even aware because you're so used to such a high stress level, or you're used to carrying all the trauma or anxiety and depression, so you almost disconnect from it. You're not even really aware of it anymore, right? But you are aware of that funny pain that keeps happening, all your palpitations, or all the tingling, or whatever it is, or the problems with digestion. So the body is kind of talking to you, and if you can start to take care with the basics, just healthy diet and trying to get good sleep, healthy environment, but also learning how to slow down the system, right? Learning grounding exercises, learning how to slow down my heart rate, slow down my breathing, right? When I do that, I'm starting to trigger the relaxation response, right? So that is connecting back to how I'm feeling. So everything is so connected. Mm-hmm. Another category is what we could term as loss/entrapment situations. And maybe I'm feeling trapped in a relationship, and it's hard for me to get out of it, like an abusive relationship, physically or emotionally. I don't want to be in it, but I'm stuck and I can't get out. Divorce, and even a good divorce, it can be stressful. So when you think of, difficult divorces, or there's children involved, financial issues involved, personal illness, bereavement, an unwanted period of unemployment, feeling lonely and disconnected from others. These are all situations where we're either dealing with loss, which we have no control over, right? Or we're dealing with feeling stuck and powerless. Again, we have no control over. So we don't have a locus of control. It's all external stuff that's happening, and we can't do anything about it, right? So it's very disempowering. And when we feel disempowered, that can cause a lot of issues. The next section, threat situations, right? So if we're in an environment at any age, but we're in an environment where we feel really unsafe, there's no stability, there's no security, we have no control over the situation, whether it's employment, finances, or housing. Might lose our house tomorrow, right? So there's a big sense of threat. Work-related stress. We may have really unreasonable demands at work, that we're working really hard, can't do any more, but it's expected more and more and more. Issues with control, issues with support, not being supported. Stress from relationships. Stress in our role that we have in life, and role change situations. Right, suddenly now I become the main caretaker for perhaps a family member or a close friend, and they require a lot of care. It's very draining and consuming. Even if I really love the person, it's still a lot of extra to do. And anything with change, it could be just the stress of changing a job, moving to a different state or a different country, getting married, pregnancy, just changing it in itself creates a stress that sometimes it could be a good stress, but it's still a stress, it's still a change, and that demands a reaction or an action to that, right? And that's why how I look at that situation is going to be a big factor in how I move through it, and how much resilience I have, and how I recover from it. And then the next category, social causes. And that could be a lot of different things. It could be just in general, you know, the increasing levels of work-related stress. Right? Could be just driving lately. You know, some people will say, you know, just driving to get to work is so stressful, right? Social media can really be a source of stress, you know. Things being said or written that could be potentially threatening, perceived as threatening or be threatening. Inequality of income, you know, I'm working just as hard as this person but not getting the same amount. Helicopter parenting, lack of good mental health education in schools, right? You know, there's so much in schools now that's being cut, and a lot of times, you know, what you see being cut are the physical education, the activity, especially for younger children too, the arts, music, stuff like that is gone.
And a lot of that stuff, you know, used to be free too. A lot of those extracurricular activities, and now they're charging a fee. So that impacts the economic piece, and it impacts certain people's ability to be able to afford to do all of that, which again then creates more of a disconnect or an isolating, or the kids aren't, you know, having fun together. They're just going to school and then coming home. So those are important. Peer group establishment things. And sometimes it can go the other way, that there's children are given too much to do. So they're not having any activities, or they're in their life is programmed every single day of the week. School, then this, then this, then this, and there's no downtime, and that can be really stressful too. Yeah, I think you see a lot of anxiety, not just with the kids, but with the parents with that, because you're at a frenetic kind of pace, and there's, you know, there's nobody's just sitting down and having dinner together anymore. You're racing from one event to the next, and it's. And then you're cramming homework in and trying to go to bed, and there's no ability to sort of, again, let the body sort of relax before you go to bed. You're kind of either can't get to sleep because you're still spinning, or you're collapsing. So that's definitely an impact.
And people don't know how to de-stress, how to slow down and calm down. And you know, when they actually calm down and it's quiet, it's scary. It sounds funny, but you know, a lot of clients, when we will do perhaps a simple calming exercise, they feel uncomfortable. Because when everything slows down, you have more clarity. You know, you kind of take your bottle with sand in it, shaking all the time, and you can't see anything. You put it on a table, you let it rest, and it all settles, and now you can see the water. So when I sit down and stop for a minute and let everything settle, now I can actually see a little more clearly, and some of the things I might not like, or I might be uncomfortable with.
I think that's especially true for people who have trauma, because one of the ways that they avoid those uncomfortable feelings and avoid dealing with the trauma is to be frenetically busy. And they tend to be workaholics, they tend to have a million activities on the side, they can't sit still. And if they do sit still, that's where the thoughts come in, and that's where they're uncomfortable, and that's where they have to get back doing something, escaping somehow.
So I think this is a good time too to, you know, when people talk about going for therapy, the idea still with a lot of people, a lot of times, is, well, that means I'm seriously mentally ill. But for the most part, going to meet with a therapist is to talk about all of this stuff, to actually sit down, have good, clear communication, have someone really listen, right, and look at these issues. And there's a lot of them, right, and most of them can be worked through. But if they're not worked through, what happens is they kind of accumulate, and then it gets to the point where I'm having a nervous breakdown, or I'm so overwhelmed, right? Or I'm drinking or using drugs way more than I did, or smoking way more than I did, you know. And I didn't add it to this, but another perfect example would be this whole COVID and this social stress. It's just overwhelming and spreading, and you know, there's so many adults, but so many more children as well. Everyone has been affected by it, you know.
Right.
So, well, we have to end. We ran out of time. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you found the information that we talked about helpful, useful. And if you have any questions about what we talked about today, please give us a call at 508-623-3931. Also, if you have any suggestions, anything that you'd like us to specifically talk about, let us know. You can also contact us at pbh@phoenixinfo.online. Thank you. Take care.